Under Education, Standard Reference Grading Update, the purpose of this presentation is to provide the board with an update on Standards-rReferenced Grading, or SRG. This presentation is for the board's information.
Thank you. Very appropriate. We're glad to have you here.
Good evening, the board. Guess what? We have an SRG update. How about that? Well, we're going to begin by showing you a video which captures some of the interactions between teachers and students as we've implemented at K-5. And you have an assignment. Your assignment, when you watch this video, is to look at or pick up on all the times that you hear a target or a standard or a scale referenced, because that is the equivalent of stating and restating a learning objective. It's very clear what I want you to learn, what is going to be the learning process. And we know that the effectiveness rate of stating an objective is statistically significant. So watch as these interactions happen and how frequently they happen and some of the teacher thinking. You'll get to see some of that as well.
Now today, you're going to look at the scale and you're going to decide, what are you proving to me that you're able to do? I first learned about the proficiency scales and the standards-rReferenced grading because I was actually a part of the team that put them together for the grade level. And I kind of started using them last year, but this is really my first foray in the classroom with them.
It's a huge shift in your mindset, but our coach here at Irving is very helpful. She did a lot of PDs. I think just sitting down and looking at what you need to teach instead of, oh, I have to teach everything.
In Wichita, Specialist has used the national standards for PE, art, and music for years. And so we've been doing, in essence, standard reference grading for a long time. It's just now we're switching the terms to scales and switching to the new grading system. And the really cool thing now is we have a broader scale and we can show more accurately where a student might be with their skills.
It has allowed us to get deeper in instruction and to focus on the necessary skills that should be taught in that particular day. So we know now that, okay, if I'm planning at a deep level, chances are now I can instruct at a deeper level, but also provide that support when it's needed for students.
We're seeing it starting more in our upper grades, but it's starting to trickle down with our students starting to realize that it's okay that they don't know it yet, and that it truly is a level of learning that we want them to master by the end of the school year. So it's been really beneficial in that way.
What is our grade level standard? 3.
As teachers are becoming more efficacious with standards-rReferenced grading and scales, they're starting to introduce it to their students so that they have more ownership. And what we're starting to see, we're just now at the point with it, where we're starting to see kids identifying their level of learning in the classroom, whether it's showing their fingers, saying that, right now I'm still at kind of a level 2. I'm still learning right now.
They are really looking at those harder questions that I'm posing to them when they're doing all of their writing and that type of thing. So we're going from maybe direct instruction on a worksheet using quotation marks and having them understand how to use quotation marks in isolation to, oh, I have to be able to do this in my writing.
I'm really enjoying it with student motivation and learning because they are able to tell me exactly what they need to work on. But they also have been enjoying it a lot because they can, like today was really fun where they were able to show me, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then I could give them that immediate feedback and praise. So then they felt that connection to the scale and to what they were learning. It was so cool.
Second grade, we're now looking at that target. We're trying to get it a 3.0. And so you're like, Ms. Stuckling, what does a 3.0 mean for dribbling with my hands?
They know what they're being graded on. No one ever feel like it's fair to tell kids, where we're going to do this thing and I'm not grading. I'm not going to tell you that I'm grading on it. They need to know.
We provide a weekly ICANN checklist, and then we discuss it before we begin the week. We discuss it in our anchor chart, and we discuss it as we're doing our graphic organizer. And that way they're becoming more exposed to the language and understanding of what the expectations are at the end of the assignment.
I found a scale wall, and I thought it would be a good tool to have in my classroom for when they do an assignment or an exit ticket in math or anything like that, so they can self-assess how they did. So, oh, I did really, really well with this. I think I could teach somebody else. Oh, I'm at a 4. Or, you know, Ms. Kaufman had to help me a lot, so I think I'm still at like a 1 or a 2. So just assessing themselves after they've completed an assignment is really helpful.
One of my coworkers has put together some of our student-friendly skills. So that is something that we kind of go over at the beginning when we're learning a new skill. And I put it up on the smart board and we talk about what does a 2 look like, what does a 3, and what does a 4 look like. And then they know what the target is.
Before we even start content, they'll highlight what they think they already know how to do. And then today I used it as a closing activity where they got to star the aspects of the scale that they feel like they made progress on.
And again, what is our goal? A3, thank you. Let's read through our 3. The assessment practice has probably been the biggest change. We have been taking our assessment piece that we know we're giving, and we're like, okay, these for sure have to be met, but how does this look like in the classroom? And we take that to the scales and then to our lesson plans. So that way we're starting with our end in mind and working backwards to make sure that we are hitting each and every piece and not showing up on assessment day going, oh gosh, I only taught a 2 and I've not exposed them to 3s or 4s, or the opposite, I've only exposed them to 4s and they have no idea how to do the simpler steps at the level 2s and 3s.
I have loved it so far with grading because when the math test that I graded where I didn't put a grade at the top, I just kind of left feedback and notes. I circled things they got wrong, starred things they got right. But then they took the scale and they had the assessment and the scale side by side, and they had to go through themselves and give themselves a grade, but they were able to really get in there and see exactly what targets and to prove it. And I thought that that was the most purposeful assessment grading I've ever done, where they really got to look at it and see where they were at in relation to the standard.
The actual practice of how we assess in PE and the things that we assess hasn't changed. What has changed is the verbiage and the lingo on how we talk to kids about what their grade will look like. It has been a really big deal when you get a kid from another school and you can see like they're grading that kid exactly the same way we're grading that kid. It's super consistent across the board, which has been fantastic.
So this would be a level 2 because we're doing it in isolation, but when we are able to do it in our story and you're automatically able to write in your narrative using quotations, that's the standard, that's a 3. The kids are very intuitive of what they think they know, and so when we're checking in with them and asking how do you feel, where are you on the scale, you know, they can give me a 2 or a 3. Or even a 1 if they're struggling, and that is something that has been really great because they know what they need to learn and they know where they are.
While we've always had super high standards for our kids, this has really given us the power and the tools to move our students further faster. I had conversations just recently with a group of teachers and said, you know, the past couple weeks, where have you been instructing? And they'd say, well, we're kind of at a level 2. And so then we pushed through and finally saw that we're now really hitting some higher level 3s and even giving opportunities for extension of that for our students. And I asked them, just be honest with me, if we weren't having these discussions over our scales and where we're going, do you believe that you would be teaching this? If we were to go back a year, would you be here right now? And they said, absolutely not.
I've seen a difference in not just student motivation, but student results with the scales. They know what they're supposed to be doing, and I think that that helps with the scales, so they know, oh, the target is that I need to add and subtract decimals, so they can work towards that goal. It's attainable instead of, oh, I need to get 100% to get an A.
I think that the kids are still kind of getting used to it. It's a very different way to grade than they're used to. And like when we did the math test, they all were like, well, did I get 80%? Did I get 100%? And I was like, well, I'm not really grading that way anymore. The question now is, did you meet the target? Did you not meet the target? And so we're kind of all having to work together to change our language. But I do think that I've had several students say that the scale has been helpful because they know exactly what they're doing. It's making it so much easier for me to highlight the critical content for my students, and that's making it easier for them to jump right into an activity.
Okay, will you guys find where it says rounding decimals scale, and will you, if your partner isn't there, will you point it out to them real quick?
The hardest thing about this process has been that we've had a lot of teachers who we know are extraordinary, and this whole process has made them feel very ordinary. And we are always very comfortable in pushing our students with that growth mindset. And this has thrown all of us in that same pool with them, and it's uncomfortable and it's hard, but they're coming out on the other side and they're going to be stronger for it, and their students are going to be better for it. And so although difficult, and some days we want to throw our hands up and quit, we know that the process is worth it.
My kids went for it, and they skipped problems. They tried. This girl drew and said, "This is hard, but just try," you know, like. So I mean, but they went for it, and I had kids who, at the end of the first day when we got done, they wrote on their test, "Not done," because they wanted to keep working on it. So the next.
I hope they get the satisfaction of knowing that all of the hard work, all of the sweat, all of the tears have been worth it, and that they have exactly what they need to make this work. It's a matter now of reminding them about the focus, providing them the support that they need and the time that they need, and then allowing them to work their magic in those classrooms. And so that's my hope, that they are able to look back and say, man, it was all worth it because we saw the evidence in the kids.
Yes, excellent. And did it work when you multiplied the check? Man, you guys, you're just killing it today.
So fantastic work from the video team, by the way. We really appreciate them. So very quickly, we'll run through some information just as a reminder of where we were, where we are, and some adjustments that we've made because we are using that feedback. This work is hard. And so back in 2016, the work began with identifying critical concepts. We had work group targets, we had focus groups, and in the end, we had a standards-referenced grading implementation that is well begun right now. And currently, we have a couple hundred teachers piloting middle school scales and high school scales. So they'll have, especially our high school will have the advantage of 2 years of front loading with that. There are 4 main components to SRG: prioritized standards, proficiency scales, quality assessments, and an aligned system. The prioritized standards are the why. Why we got into this is because we have only so many hours with our students K-12, and we have to and have organized and prioritized the standards to get the most impact with teacher efficiency, time on task. Did I skip one? Nope, there we are, I'm sorry. So the next 2 components, proficiency scales and quality assessments. Proficiency scales, the use of scales are unique. Now, we are not the only district doing SRG that uses proficiency scales, but it is a hinge. It does make things unique to us, and it is also part of the challenge in what makes the work hard, not just for planning and instructing, but in documenting and reporting. And the proficiency scales are that objective that I was telling you about. We go back to the example of riding the bike, the target, the proficiency level being riding a bicycle up and down the street. And that would be a 3, and then we have those foundational skills along the way: balancing, pedaling, holding the handlebars, maybe going from one parent to another. So we have to teach those foundational skills to get to that level 3. So here we have a student who is riding the bicycle up and down the street. And then we have our next example of somebody who is likely performing a bit farther. So just because I can ride my bike up and down the street, or now that I can do wheelies or ride without hands, it doesn't mean I'm ready to drive a car, but it does mean I'm ready to do more things with that skill. Okay, sorry.
So one of the things that we did when we worked on our development plan for professional learning is we did use those 4 main components, and we very purposely provided targeted professional learning for each one of those components. We started that learning really, we've started it since 2016, but the targeted piece we were working through in 2018. We're still working through our plan, but what we're also doing is being very careful to listen and to get as much feedback as possible. One of the things that we recently did was get feedback from the buildings around a few of those key components, and what we learned is this graph describes how we're doing, and we asked, what is it that we need to work on? So we know from this that we feel pretty good about why. We can explain why we're doing this, but there are some key components that we still have work to do. For example, answering questions specific to grading, we know we need to work on that. We know we need to work on how do we plan with that end in mind, with that assessment piece. So we have, based on our feedback, identified some very key pieces that we know we need to come back around to and add more additional professional learning and additional groups even. One of the things that we also did in response to this is we knew that we needed additional time for teachers to plan and walk through how you do that with our ELA curriculum especially. So we do have this flyer that's been out for a while, and what we have around the district, we're providing different sessions throughout the entire year, even through April, that teachers can attend after school. We're also encouraging our coaches during our PD sessions to also do some of those planning sessions.
I'm going to interrupt for just a second. So when we say planning session, it doesn't just mean some additional time to write some lesson plans. It is a very strategy-focused way to help teachers wrap their mind around how they plan with the end in mind. It's a strategy for planning for that objective and how we're going to lead up to it. And that is the major shift. That's the hard work of this, is doing something that I've never done before in a way that I have never done it. And so we recognize that, and we heard what people are saying, and we realized what they are needing, and so we created PD around that. And this information also forms what we will do at secondary level.
Can you also share exactly what you did to slow it down? Because yes, you're adding more things for support, but you did listen, and there was some adjustments that were made to that as well. Can you please share that with the board?
Sure. So the standards and the number of them are not new. They're not new in the state. They're simply reorganized, prioritized, and probably picked apart to a larger degree than they have been in quite some time. And for example, in the first quarter in English Language Arts, there are 14 standards and targets that we would have suggested to be assessed. And when it became overwhelming, and you've heard that message, how overwhelming this is, and part of that is the documentation and the reporting is the overwhelming part. We said, okay, let's, instead of all 14, let's look at 5. Knowing some had already done 14 and some were still struggling, look at 5. And it's a learning year. You do not have to be perfect at this. Talk with us and let us also help you do this. And so that is an example of one of the shifts that we made in slowing things down, taking a little pressure off, get the hang of it, get the hang of how to plan for it. Let's enter the second quarter with that new frame of how to plan. Now you've walked through it a quarter. Now we can enter the second quarter with the end in mind and how to plan around that. And now let's look at those targets again.
I'd also like you to address some of the things that we've also kind of shifted for conferences for families, so that families can expect what can they expect when they go to conferences this time around as well.
So one of the things that parents can expect, we have shared a video with all of our schools. We're hoping that they will share that with parents. It really gives an overview of what standards reference planning and instruction is. Parents can also expect they might see an example of what a progress report might look like. We've also suggested and recommended that they spend time talking to the parents about their strengths, what are some of the things that they're working on, and even having some of the students share, here are some targets that we're working on and here's what it looks like. Another thing that we're doing as well is with our professional learning, we have not just this that could be on the plan. We do have some other things that we want to continue working on for professional learning, but we also put some of those things on hold so that right now we can focus just on all of the pieces that we need to get in place. One of the things that we also wanted to talk about was we did have 4 parent Q&A sessions, and we will continue to have parent Q&A sessions. I think our next set will be in April is what we're thinking. And we also have our SRG hotline that we still have through October, and we are extending that through November.
Can you explain what families need to do and what they can expect when they call this number?
Okay. What parents need, what they would need to do if they're wanting to attend a parent Q&A session, we're going to send out some information for that soon. And if they want to call the SRG hotline, we do have a number. I think it's on our PowerPoint. But really, anytime parents have a question, they could call between 5 and 7 on the Tuesday through Thursday during the month. And our curriculum specialists and others that really know this work well are there ready to listen and ready to answer any questions that they have. So we did finish our parent Q&A sessions, and we had a very good turnout. I think we had around 140 people, and we collected about 90 questions. All of that information is posted on our website, our district website. And these were the top 5 questions that we were asked. The first one was, what is a standard? And we found that we really needed to be careful about how we talk about a standard versus how we talk about a standardized assessment. So we made sure to make sure people knew there was a difference. Our assessment is what we do once a year for the state. We have our state assessments. But our standards, those are the statements, and those are what we want our students to know and be able to do by the end of the year. And our next one was, will students have a GPA? One of the things that we now know that we do need to do is move up our communication timeline for secondary and make sure people understand that we will still convert to letter grades at the middle school and high school. So then we will still have GPAs. Students will still have what they need on their transcripts when they're applying for different post-secondary opportunities. And we also have progress report examples on our website, and we also provided those at the parent Q&A sessions.
We've also been sharing our work with some community partners. Here are some examples of those partners that we've been visiting with so that they understand the work that we're doing in Wichita Public Schools and what it means when a student leaves us and has a grade for this content or the other. We have communicated with the Board of Regents, Wichita State University, the State Board of Education, the Kansas Business Educators Association. One of the things that the business leaders appreciate is that behavior work and work habit and what we would call employability skills are scaled and taught and reported on very specifically. And in the commissioner's work of his listening sessions around the state, you might recall that he spoke with business leaders, and largely what they're asking for are those highlighted, improved employability skills. And we've had a presentation at an NAACP event as well. We have some additional events coming up that we haven't done yet with some student support agencies and some other business leaders and other leaders in the community that have expressed an interest in wanting to know more. And we've have invited these folks in for meetings at AMAC to sit down and review this and ask their questions with us. Okay.
We do have some questions. Ron?
Yeah, I was wanting to know about, I think, let's see, what slide was it? Professional learning needs. You were talking about Otis.
Yes.
So are the teachers finding that user-friendly? And I guess this is the format or the computer program that the teachers are using?
Right.
How's that going?
Otis is the software. So when the pilot occurred, when piloting the scales occurred, several things happened. When a target for choosing a reporting system happened, it was then discovered we need to agree what goes on it. So all these things happened at once, not at once, but over the course of a few years, and it became ideal to put it in package format, that we're talking about standards, we're talking about how to assess them, we're talking about scales for the learning, and we're talking about how to report them. And so for the folks who were piloting, when they didn't have a reporting tool to use, that became a barrier for them to carry out that work. And then that's when different vendors were researched for that purpose. So then we came to Otis, and yes, Otis is the software that we do use for reporting. And I think I would say it's split, that it is a barrier for some. It's difficult, it's not intuitive, but then for others it absolutely is. Okay. And so our curriculum specialists and our technology integration specialists are assisting both with some targeted PD, but also some individual coaching or building level work around that. And once they are able to work through with some of that expertise, then there are things that become, oh, okay, I get it. And so again, those are lessons we've learned about, what can we do to support the learning for teachers. So that is also been both easy and difficult, just depends.
So the teacher uses it, and then they can print out like a paper copy for the parents, and just like
right, exactly. There will be a printed out progress report.
And then after conferences, was the feedback pretty good from?
Yes,
most conferences.
The ones I know that I have spoken of have had successful conferences. They have had a lot of anxiety leading up to those conferences. Yeah. Having to talk about a system that's new to themselves, but once they've gone through it, and if they've even used some of our suggested techniques with talking about students, talking about their interests, building relationships with families, and then talking about work samples and scales, it went very well for the ones I have visited with.
All right, thank you.
Ernestine?
One of the things that I notice about this is that I believe the jargon has made it more difficult sounding. This is the system that typing teachers have used for eternity. That can you type 50 words a minute? Yeah. Check. Can you type 60 words a minute? Check. PE teachers. I taught, as you know, at Metro, the alternative school, for 25 years, we've had this kind of system. Do you know how a bill becomes a law? Can you demonstrate to me? Can you show me? So it was know, show, teach. So it seems to me almost that this needs a plain old name, not SRG. Like, I can do. That this is the I Can Do program.
I like it.
Can Do program, yeah. So that the teacher says to the student, when you can do, come show. And then the student says, now, the biggest problem that I see teachers going to have is not learning how to do it and not figuring out. They will love that part. But it's what do you do when you've got 5 kids that can, within the first few days, be able to say, I can do, I can show, I can teach. And you've got kids over here going, huh? What? And then having to have, because in effect it's going to have to be individualized.
And that's not a new challenge. Those teachers have always had those ranges of abilities in there.
But the problem has been in the past is that you typically roll the ball down the middle, and these fall off, and these fall off, and you say, that's the best I can do, I'm going to try to, and you've got books over here for this one, and you've got something else over here that you're doing for. But one of the things about this is that helping those teachers to find different ways that a student can show competency. So I can put this puzzle together. Like I used to have puzzles that they would put together to show how a bill becomes a law. It's all mixed up, and they had to show how the bill becomes a law, for example. That was, or they could teach another student while I'm listening. I had students that would create an entire computer program. I loved it, because then I could use that for teaching somebody else. But one boy who was so test aversive was a world history student, and in order to demonstrate that he understood as a total complete for the course, he created a, what do you call it, immortal character that was started at the, in Samaria, Nebuchadnezzar, and this character lived all the way through history, all the way up to the Elizabethan times. And he wrote a 60-page book with this immortal character going there. He didn't have to take a test because he, with his story, demonstrated, boy, did he understand history. He even found out the name of Nebuchadnezzar's wife, and I didn't know he had one. But the point I'm making is that it seems to me that the jargon and the initials are making this sound a lot more complicated than it is. Can the child do? Can the child show? Can the child teach?
You heard the teacher who said, when the children asked, did I get a 70? Did I get an 80? That's not how we're grading. And she says, that's not how I'm grading it anymore. The question is, did you meet the target?
Well,
just like as you described.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as I said, for 25 years as a teacher, that was, and so that the students could then move ahead at their own pace. And one of the things that I found was that kids really felt that being able to move ahead, or for example, teachers might be able to say, when you meet the target, you can read the extra books that are on the shelf over here. You can read whatever you want, or give an award like that for being able to.
We have a responsibility to enrich the students
Absolutely.
that are passing that proficiency,
but
yes.
I think this is a wonderful, simple, makes sense program. Like I said, typing teachers and PE teachers have been using this for years. Academic teachers ought to, and many have been using this. They just didn't call it SRG and IEPs and CE, what is that?
CEP?
Yeah. I think that's made it feel scary to teachers, where I think that when they really see that all this is, can the kid do it? Can the kid show it? That's Ernestine Crable editorial opinion.
Gosh, how do I follow that, Ernestine? I have a couple of mundane questions here. One is about Otis, because I have heard a lot of teachers talk about Otis and their concerns with Otis. And unfortunately, we had a bad beginning when it crashed on us when we were doing training, and that put a bad taste in people's mouth and so on. But as we've moved through, and we're now 9 weeks in, yes, we have some that have adopted it readily. Yes, we have some that are still not trying to figure it out, which is where you are in a learning curve no matter what. But overall, are we moving in the right direction with that?
I believe we are, and we have some teams, committees, if you will, working on the feedback around those issues in particular, to create communications that are user-friendly in our world. I think sometimes the technology, it makes sense to technology-minded people. So we get a variety of people working on what is the description of, what does this instruction need to look like? So we are generating, from this committee, we are generating, a set of instructions that might be helpful for this or that. And probably with many pilots, and I'm not the technology guru, but with many technology pilots, you maybe don't always have the full range of access or administrative authority in a pilot, and you get to try out 10 things, but then when you're in the real, August comes around in September, well, there's 12 things you needed to know, but you don't know that until you're in the middle of it. And so we have discovered some of those things that we never would have found in a pilot. We wouldn't have ever found them until we were in it. And so there we are, and we have people working on that.
Okay, so information's going out to our staff and training is going out to our staff?
Yes, yes.
Okay. My second question is on the sessions. Are there sessions for a PD targeted for our special ed, especially interrelated teachers, and our ESOL teachers?
Yes.
Because those are the two groups that I hear the most concern from.
Yes.
Because they've got kids who legitimately are below grade level. That's the reason they're identified, and they're working very hard to help them gain. But there's just concern about that. So are we
Yes.
training, and how do we, well, give me an example of what we're doing for those students to be able to make sure that they are getting grade level work, but also catching up with the work that they're behind.
I would say to you what I would describe as there's been a groundswell of interest in special ed staff wanting to know more about how this works and what can I do for my students.
Right.
And so as we were rolling out implementation and training, then you quickly realize you've got groups saying, don't forget me, I want to know more about it. And so that's happening, and Learning Services Department is working closely, very closely with Student Support Services Department to create some common messages and also analyze what trainings we need for certain subgroups of staff and even some of those got addressed today during today's in-service time. Counselors, social workers, and so on. We have some designated trainings coming up in the summer. Special Ed has Special Ed Summit that they're going to repeat next year. The other part of that is exactly what you said, which is students are largely held accountable to grade level standards and exposed to that rigor of work. And so an IEP, for example, and a team will determine what a child needs for supports in reaching those that rigorous content. And that's part of where our two departments have to work together, because the accommodations, for example, that are provided need to be provided so the student can achieve the target, not so we change the target necessarily. But there are all kinds of levels of IEPs that are going to be very tailored to what a child needs, and those IEPs will be honored, and we'll train staff in whatever we can do wherever they feel like would meet their needs as well. But yes, that is very much a part of the plan.
And that training will happen sometime relatively soon, because IEPs, they're going to be reviewing around the semester time. A lot of IEPs are reviewed.
Yes, and we would not say ready, set, go. All IEPs have to be, updated to reflect an SRG today. And it's also not my department, but that we would support the ongoing process of, well, let's get teachers talking about what should a goal in an IEP be if we do know this more clearly now about this grade level content or that grade level content. So maybe we can be more even meaningful and targeted with the goals we do set.
And I would add to that is that we also have been working hard to revamp our Friday Learning Lab schedule in a little bit, so that through the month of November we're going to be doing very specific trainings with our coaches, who will then be able to take that back to the buildings. And it's actually really exciting, because we're having conversations about instruction and about standards and about how we support students almost on a daily basis. And so we're taking those conversations we're having to those Friday Learning Labs, and we're going to structure certain scenarios around those conversations so that we can all work through that and help students. So it's exciting. I'm excited about it.
I'm right with Ernestina in that I think this is something that's going to raise the rigor in our district, and it's much clearer to a parent, to a child, to a teacher what the expectations are, and it's clear across the district, because as we well know, we have a very mobile community of students, and when they move from school A to school B to school C within 1 year, they're seeing the same kinds of things and the same expectations. That's wonderful. We're just on a really steep learning curve right now.
Yes.
For everyone.
Do you have a new name you want to use for this system?
I do not.
I think
Thank you.
it should be no show share.
No show
share. By the way, I think it will not increase our rigor. I think it will demonstrate the rigor that we've had, but had no way to show. How can you tell between a high B and a low B or a high C and a low? I think it'll demonstrate the rigor that we've already been doing. It's like, oh, yeah, well, he really can do that. No show share.